Today's case is an incredibly complicated, convoluted case that takes us down a winding path full of twists and turns. As soon as you think you know exactly what happened, you will be met with evidence to say otherwise, but it is up to us to take every bit of information we learn today and use that to make an informed decision. You will be asking yourself so many questions as you watch this video, and I encourage each and every one of you to ask and or try to answer them throughout. But by the end, I want you all to let me know what you think down below. Is 15-month-old Prince Rams the victim of a calculated, cold-blooded murder, or was this the tragic result of a mysterious illness? But before we get into the case, I want to talk about one thing that you can add to your everyday to stay healthy. Your gut health is so very important to your overall well-being. A lot of people don't realize, but your gut health plays such a huge role in your energy levels, concentration, and how you feel throughout each day. That's why I've been using Broom to support my gut. I'm someone who struggled with my gut health for literally my entire life. I suffer from cramps, low energy, and my stomach just never feels quite right. I try my best to eat a balanced diet, but it can feel impossible to keep track of everything I eat to ensure that I have a healthy gut balance, along with everything else I worry about with protein, my macros, vitamins, minerals, and all of that. But thanks to Broom, it's so much easier to make sure I'm getting what I need for my gut. Broom's fiber supplementation is made with psyllium husk, which nourishes your gut bacteria, supports healthy digestion, and also helps to reduce hunger and promote fullness. Psyllium fiber supplementation has been shown to lower BMI and promote weight loss compared to diet alone. It helps reduce hunger and promotes fullness after meals, and helps support bowel regularity and relieve occasional constipation. All you do is add 1 scoop to your water and drink it once or twice a day. Personally, I drink a scoop each morning with my water. I have the strawberry flavor, which is my absolute favorite. I love to have something sweet first thing in the morning with my morning eggs, so this is an absolute delight to add to my morning. Since starting Broom, my gut just feels so much lighter. I can concentrate longer at work because I'm not worrying about my stomach hurting, and I have more energy, which is so important to me because I am a very active person. So give Broom a try out for yourself with the special offer they have for viewers of this channel. Head to colonbroom.com/RachelShannon and use code RachelShannon to save up to 65% off of Broom. Once again, that's colonbroom.com/RachelShannon using code RachelShannon to save up to 65% off a 6-month supply. Thank you again so much to Broom for partnering with me on today's video. With that being said, let's get right into today's case. Hera McLeod was 29 years old when she met Joaquin Rams on the dating site Match.com back in 2010. At that time, she was very much ready for a serious relationship. She dreamed of settling down, getting married, and having children with the love of her life, and after meeting Joaquin, that dream didn't seem too far away. Hera went on to say that Joaquin was unlike anyone she had ever met before. He was intriguing, charismatic, and interesting. He seemed like an open book, telling her his fears, his hopes, and dreams. He told her about his rough childhood, how all he wanted from life was to be loved by those around him. He seemed like a damaged man who Hera could fix. Hera quickly fell for him, and from there, their relationship blossomed. At the time, Joaquin already had a 12-year-old son, Shadow, from a previous relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Sean. This didn't bother Hera at all, though, seeing that Joaquin was a loving, caring father. After he and his ex broke up, he was granted full custody of his son. So by that point, he told Hera that Shadow's mother wasn't in the picture. He lived full-time with him, and Joaquin seemingly did everything in his power to create the best life possible for his son. Then, soon after their relationship began, Hera found herself pregnant with a son of her own. The couple became engaged and moved in together in Bristow, Virginia. Then, by July 1st, 2011, Hera gave birth to a baby boy, Prince Elias Rams. According to Hera, Prince was a happy, bubbly little boy. Hera loved him with all her heart, and anyone who saw him was drawn in by his adorable, bright smile. Finally, Hera had the family she always wanted. She had the best partner, the best father to her son, and she was hopeful that they would remain a happy, healthy family unit. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be sharing this story with you all. As you could have expected, after the initial honeymoon stages of the relationship between Hera and Joaquin, the red flags began to appear. It started off as Joaquin telling lies and making up things about his life. When confronted with these lies, he always had some way of making Hera feel bad for him, always playing the victim. He would bring up his bad childhood and his desperate need to be loved, always drawing Hera back in. He then slowly started separating Hera from her friends and family. No one in Hera's life ever really liked Joaquin, so they didn't want him around. He wouldn't be invited to certain social events, and if he ever was there, he never got along with anyone. Of course, this caused a lot of tension between Hera and her friends, leading to some of them cutting Hera off completely because they just didn't want to be around Joaquin. But of course, in Joaquin's eyes, if Hera's friends didn't like him, it was a direct hit at their relationship, and they shouldn't be in her life anyways because they didn't respect her and her partner. That is one of the many ways an abuser can separate their victim from everyone on the outside who loves them and who can be a voice of reason. Then came the outbursts and temper tantrums, not only directed at Hera, but also at his own son, Shadow. He could lose his temper and fly into a violent rage at the drop of a hat, leaving Hera terrified for her own safety and making her feel like she needed to step in and protect Shadow. He would verbally berate them, and sometimes things even got physical. There was once where he put a pillow over her face when she was sleeping, and at the time, she didn't know if it was a dream or if it was real, but looking back, it was so real, and she was in denial. But each time Joaquin had one of his fits of rage, there was always an apology, always something to make up for it, always something to make Hera feel bad for reacting. So she always stayed, always found excuses for why Joaquin was behaving the way he did. She would later say that she knew toxic, abusive relationships existed and never thought she would find herself in one. And watching videos of Hera, she seems like a very independent, strong-willed woman. So she's definitely the last person that you would expect to be in one of these types of relationships. But when you're being subjected to the gaslighting, the manipulation, the verbal abuse, you may not even realize that you're in the depths of an abusive relationship. You often don't realize until it's too late. The final straw for Hera was when, just 2 weeks after Prince was born, Joaquin allegedly sexually assaulted Hera's 19-year-old little sister. Hera, her parents, and her little sister worked together to file a police report, but police basically concluded that they were making the story up to get back at Joaquin. So nothing was ever done about it, and when you read most reports, it stated that Joaquin slept with her sister, but I do believe what came directly from Hera, which is that this was not a consensual encounter. Again, this is all alleged. It's coming from her that this happened, so take with that what you will. But this seemed to really be what made Hera face the reality she was in. Joaquin ain't shit. He is violent, dangerous, and she doesn't deserve any of this. So Hera left Joaquin and took Prince with her. From there, Hera went to the courts to get custody of Prince, and let me tell you, the custody battle between them was a ferocious one. In fact, Hera would later call it a full-out war because of how drawn-out, vicious, and exhausting it was. But finally, by March of 2012, she was granted full custody, though Joaquin was still allowed supervised visits. This decision was made because at the time, it appeared that Joaquin didn't have a job, so he had no way to support Prince, but he did still want Prince to be able to see his father on a weekly basis through those supervised visits. After this decision, Joaquin still fought for unsupervised visits with Prince, so he was ordered to undergo psychological evaluation. The judge ruled that there would be another court session held at a later time to discuss unsupervised visitation. But of course, due to how Joaquin had treated her all throughout their relationship, Hera was terrified at the thought of Joaquin seeing Prince unsupervised. So she decided to hire a private investigator to look more into Joaquin's past. She felt that there must have been something there. No way she was the first woman to be treated so poorly by Joaquin. And what she ended up finding was absolutely horrifying. I don't think you're ready for what I'm about to tell you. They found that back in March of 2003, Joaquin's ex, Sean, and the mother of his previous son, Shadow, was found dead in her apartment. Just about a year after the two broke up, Joaquin had been spotted breaking into her house, so police were called. When they arrived, they found that she was dead, lying on the floor in her living room after suffering from a single gunshot wound to the head. However, by the point her body was found, it was determined that she had already been dead for at least a day already, so there was no way that Joaquin had shot her in that moment. Joaquin went on to explain to police that he only broke in because he hadn't heard from her in multiple days, so he wanted to check on her and make sure she was okay, and clearly she wasn't. However, of course, since he was her ex-boyfriend and the father of her child, he was the main suspect in her murder. Even if he didn't shoot her that day, he obviously could have done so in the days before her body was discovered. Throughout the investigation into her death, though, he apparently remained cooperative with the investigation. Police went on to say that there was no definitive proof that he was involved in her murder, so to this day, the case remains open and Joaquin has never been charged with anything in relation to her murder. But I want to note that when she died, she did have a $142,000 life insurance policy, which Joaquin did try and collect. He was under the impression that he was the beneficiary, but their son was actually the beneficiary. So the money was placed into a trust that Joaquin did not have access to and would only be paid out once Shadow was 18. From there, Joaquin and Shadow lived together in Manassas City, where Shadow thrived. I do want to note that, as I stated earlier, when Joaquin met Hera, he told her that his ex was not involved in Shadow's life. But he failed to mention that she was dead or that she had been murdered. And that is why she was completely absent from her son's life. But Joaquin's sketchy past does not end there. By November of 2008, Joaquin's mother, Alma Collins, was found dead in her home along with an apparent suicide note. Her cause of death was later determined to be asphyxiation, but due to the note she apparently wrote indicating her intentions to take her own life, her death was officially ruled a suicide. After her death, other family members became suspicious of the circumstances, not fully believing the story they were being made to believe. Joaquin then took to his blog where he wrote about his mother's struggles with Alzheimer's. He also said that she wrote a 2-page note which clearly indicated her reasoning for taking her own life. She said that she didn't want to be a burden to her son any longer. Then, after her death, Joaquin once again filed to collect the life insurance money. This time, it was granted to him, and he banked $240,000. Finding out this information was startling and honestly scary. The fact that he had 2 people close to him die under such suspicious circumstances only about 5 years apart didn't seem like a coincidence. Plus, the alarming fact that Joaquin stood to benefit from both deaths. He thought he'd get the money from Sean's insurance, and even though that didn't work out, he did receive monthly Social Security checks that were meant to support Shadow. Then he was able to collect from his mother's death. All throughout this time, it was known that Joaquin was an aspiring music producer, but he never really made it. He was always struggling financially, so he knew that he needed to find different ways to get some quick cash. What better way than killing his ex-girlfriend and his mother, who he said was already struggling with her health anyways? Again, all of this is alleged, and he's never been formally charged in either case, but nonetheless, it's not a good look for him, and it was terrifying for Hera. At the next custody hearing in August of 2012, Hera brought all this information to the judge. She feared for Prince's safety if he was alone with his father. He clearly had a tumultuous history and couldn't be trusted to care for him. What made Hera even more terrified was that Joaquin was still in a rough financial spot. If he was doing all of this for the money, who's to say that he won't do it again, since it clearly has worked for him in the past? But for the prior months, Joaquin had been undergoing psychological evaluation. His psychologist did testify at the hearing, saying that she felt that Joaquin was a responsible parent. Before he had Prince, he had his son Shadow, and he was seemingly a good father for all the years that he had sole custody of him. Shadow excelled in school, even earning himself a scholarship to a top-tier private school. He went on to play golf as well, performing at the top among his peers. He seemed well cared for and well loved. There was no reason for the psychologist to think that Prince would be treated any differently. Due to this, the judge did grant Joaquin unsupervised visits with Prince. He would be allowed to see his father for 8 hours at a time every other weekend. This absolutely outraged Hera, and she warned the courts that this ruling is putting her son in danger. But of course, they didn't listen, and before long, Hera's fears would be confirmed in the most devastating way possible. At the time, Joaquin was living in a home in Manassas City with his older son and 2 roommates, while Hera was living in Maryland. It seemed that the first unsupervised visit went okay, nothing stood out, nothing concerning happened. However, by the second visit on September 8th, Hera received a call to report that Prince had a seizure and was being rushed to the hospital. Of course, Hera rushed over to the Prince William County Hospital as fast as she could to get to her son. When she got there, she learned that Prince had 1 seizure at the home with Joaquin, then experienced 2 additional seizures at the hospital. He was kept overnight for monitoring before being released the following morning. According to Hera, he was still feverish and appeared to be dizzy, having trouble walking when she took him from the hospital. 2 days after this happened, Prince went to the neurologist for testing. There, it was reported that Prince was still dizzy, still a bit out of it, and may have suffered a 4th seizure at some point during those 2 days. At that time, neurologist was concerned that Prince may have been infected with some sort of respiratory virus. They believed that he was experiencing febrile seizures, which are seizures that are triggered by a high fever, typically above 100 degrees. These are relatively common in young children up until the age of 6. So if there was one of these febrile seizures, it wouldn't have called for that much concern. However, it's very rare for a child to have as many as 4 seizures within a 24-hour period without an underlying cause. Due to this, doctors became concerned that Prince may be at risk for developing epilepsy. This meant that doctors wanted to be sure to monitor him very closely to determine if and what the underlying cause may be. By September 26th, Prince fell ill once again, having another spike in temperature, causing yet another seizure. Of course, Hera took him to the hospital, where he was treated and monitored once again. After he seemed to be doing better, he was then discharged once again. At some point during this time, Prince had his third unsupervised visit with his father, which again seemed uneventful. But then, by October 20th, Prince was scheduled to see his father for his fourth visit. Just before Joaquin got to the meeting point to pick Prince up, Prince had experienced yet another seizure. Of course, Hera was very worried about sending Prince to his father's house in that condition, but she wanted to make sure that she was complying with the court orders, so she gave her baby some Tylenol to help control his fever, then reluctantly handed him over to the court-appointed supervisor who handled the exchange to Joaquin. They were both notified of Prince's seizure, making sure that he was handled with extra care that day. According to later reports from Joaquin and his roommates, once Prince arrived at the home in Manassas, Shadow and Joaquin's two roommates all played with Prince for a bit before Joaquin fed him. That afternoon, Prince appeared to get tired, so Joaquin laid him down for a nap in his crib, which was located in the room he shared with Shadow. Prince took his nap while Shadow was next to him playing video games. By around 2:20 p.m., according to Joaquin's roommate, he got up and walked past Prince's room, only to find that Prince was making some rasping sounds and was shaking in his crib. Joaquin rushed over to him, picked him up, and yelled for someone to call 911. He then carried Prince over to the bathroom to splash some water on him to cool him down. But by that point, he was no longer responding.
What's the problem?
About a 15-month-old is, right now he's unconscious. He was having seizures, and...
Okay, so he's having seizures?
Yes,
okay.
and we're concerned he's not really breathing well.
Okay, I can help you. What's your name? All right, sir. Usually if they're having a seizure, they will appear that way. I have the call in the system, and we're going to have units out there. So let me just ask you, has the seizure stopped yet?
Has the seizure stopped?
He was shaking and stopped breathing.
He's shaking, and now he's trying to give him mouth-to-mouth because he seems to be stopping breathing.
Okay, just a second. If he's shaking, then he may still be going through that
The
seizure
shaking
right now.
seems to stop.
Okay, all right. The shaking has stopped?
Yes, but he doesn't seem to be breathing, and he's totally unresponsive.
Okay, all right. Just a second now.
And he's bleeding from his nose.
He's bleeding?
Yes.
Okay, hold on now. I don't want you to don't do any mouth-to-mouth right now, okay?
While the roommate was on the phone with the dispatcher, he said that Prince has now stopped breathing and stopped moving, and his nose was bleeding. He was then told to get Prince out of the bathtub and lay him on the ground to start CPR, which they did. By 2:27 p.m., just 7 minutes after the call was made, paramedics arrived to the home to find that Prince was unconscious, not breathing, and did not have a heartbeat. Basic life support efforts were made at that time before loading Prince into the ambulance to be rushed to the hospital. He arrived by 2:39 p.m., but by that point, Prince still was not breathing. By 2:44 p.m., hospital staff took Prince's temperature, which was at 91.2 degrees. More desperate efforts were taken to bring Prince back, and finally, by around 3 p.m., they brought him back. He was now breathing, and his heart was beating again. But that was about 40 minutes after he first went unresponsive. This meant that his brain was deprived of oxygen for all of that time, leading to very extensive brain damage. From there, Prince was placed on a ventilator and placed on life support. All the while, Hera was learning the horrifying news of what happened to her baby boy. Hera was told that Prince had suffered cardiac arrest and was put on life support. She rushed down to the hospital from her home, where she was met with the horrifying sight of her baby boy hooked up to a ventilator. She was absolutely beside herself with panic and worry, desperately hoping that her baby would survive this. But after a full day on life support, Prince's condition just was not getting any better. He just suffered too much brain damage, and he had practically no brain activity at that point. So tragically, 15-month-old Prince Rams was removed from life support, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital on October 21st, 2012. Pretty much immediately after Prince's death, the investigation into what happened began. Suspicion quickly fell on Joaquin as investigators were well aware of his past history. Many of the detectives on Prince's case fully believed that Joaquin was responsible for the death of his ex-girlfriend almost 10 years prior. Some even felt that he may have been involved in his mother's death back in 2008 as well. In both cases, once again, Joaquin stood to benefit financially. And that was the case yet again with Prince. Turns out, when Prince was just 2 months old, Joaquin took out 3 different life insurance policies on him. One was for almost $500,000, another for $50,000, and a third for $35,000. They also found that on one of the policies, Joaquin falsely stated that Prince's mother, Hera, was dead so that he would be the sole beneficiary. This immediately made investigators that much more suspicious of Joaquin because most parents wouldn't even think to take out insurance policies on their own children. That is just not common practice because most people are pretty confident that their child is going to live a full, healthy life. It is very rare for a parent to do such a thing. So already, that was not a good look for Joaquin. Then, after baby Prince's death, his body was sent to the medical examiner for an autopsy. In her final report, she noted that Prince had a history of febrile seizures. She examined his brain and found that his brain was swollen, but that was consistent with hypoxia and mechanical ventilation. Other than that, she found no other brain abnormalities that could explain the febrile seizures. Basically, she said that the only damage to his brain was caused after he stopped breathing from this final incident. The report went on to state that there were findings consistent with drowning, including fluid within the sinuses, airways, lungs, and intestines. She noticed that when Prince was found, he was wet, naked, and cold after being flushed with all that water. She wrote that, again, Prince had a temperature of just 91.2 degrees upon arrival to the hospital. This was taken just about 30 minutes after he first collapsed. She did not believe that it was possible for his temperature to have dropped so quickly in such a short period of time if this temperature truly was high enough to have induced a febrile seizure. However, it was noted that no one took his temperature while his fever was spiked, so we truly don't know just how high his temperature really was. Either way, based on these findings, the medical examiner ruled that Prince's cause of death was actually drowning, though she didn't know whether she believed it was from homicide or not. Based on the finding that Prince died as a result of drowning and not the seizure, police believed that they had enough information to arrest Joaquin and charge him with the first-degree murder of his son. However, after his arrest, his defense team got to work to poke holes in every bit of evidence the investigation was uncovering. The biggest part of the prosecution's case would have been that medical testimony. The fact that Prince was drowned is proof that Joaquin is responsible. So they had their own medical examiner review the report, and they pointed to various findings in that original autopsy. They noted that the amount of fluid in the sinuses and lungs could be explained by him being sick. They also said that sometimes people can drown without any water in their lungs or airways, continuing that water in the lungs or airways is not the sole indicator of drowning. So having fluid there doesn't necessarily mean that Prince drowned. It could have also been caused by the IV fluids he was on at the hospital. They also said that Prince's temperature wasn't taken when he first experienced the seizure, so there's no way to determine if 91.2 degrees is too low. Again, that was the temperature when he arrived to the hospital. They continued that if his heart weren't beating that entire 30 minutes before he arrived to the hospital, it is possible that his temperature could have lowered that rapidly. After the second report came out, the chief medical examiner in Virginia reviewed both reports, the initial report plus the defense's report. By 2014, she actually released a new report changing Prince's cause of death from drowning to undetermined. She wrote that the circumstances surrounding Prince's death are very suspicious, but that she cannot say with full certainty that he drowned. This, of course, threw a wrench in the prosecution's story. For the 5 years that followed, investigation into this case continued. This seemingly open and shut case turned into an extremely complicated and convoluted case. Medical experts were going back and forth on how deadly Prince's condition was on its own. As I stated, the autopsy was reviewed multiple times and changes were made to the final reports. There was so much back and forth in this case. Hera was feeling hopeless that Joaquin would never have to pay for what she thought he did. During all of this, Joaquin's charges had been upped from murder to capital murder, meaning that the prosecution could seek the death penalty. However, Joaquin ended up waiving his rights to a jury trial, instead opting for a bench trial in exchange for the prosecution not going for the death penalty. That means that a jury will not decide his fate. Only the judge presiding over the case will be the decision maker. Then finally, after half a decade of waiting, Joaquin finally went to trial for the murder of his son in April of 2017. The prosecution claimed that Joaquin did kill his son, and the motive was money, the life insurance payouts. They claimed that the febrile seizures, even as frequently as Prince was having them, are relatively common and are not lethal in boys Prince's age. They said that even though no one in the home actually saw him drown Prince, he still could have done it, or he could have suffocated him. During the whole ordeal, there was plenty of time in which Joaquin had Prince alone without the prying eyes of his roommates. That gave him enough time to suffocate Prince. Whether he splashed enough water in his face to cause him to stop breathing, or he placed his hand over his nose and mouth. Whichever he did, it is entirely possible that he suffocated his child without leaving a single mark on him. They mentioned how when paramedics got to the scene, Prince was already cold to the touch. So yes, even though his official temperature wasn't taken until they reached the hospital, according to paramedics, within 7 minutes of him having a high enough temperature to cause a seizure, again, over 100 degrees, it suddenly dropped more than 10 degrees. That just does not happen. They pointed out how Joaquin took out that life insurance policy on Prince pretty much right after he was born. That shows that he was just waiting for his opportunity. Then, when he found out about Prince's health issues, which, the prosecution does believe that he very much did have these health issues, but when Joaquin found out about them, that gave him the perfect alibi. They argued that Joaquin used Prince's seizures to kill him and claimed that it was actually the seizure that caused his death. It was the perfect plan. Wait for when he gets him alone and wait for when he was sick enough to possibly have a seizure. Again, when Hera dropped him off, he was coming down from a seizure. Whether or not he actually suffered one in Joaquin's care doesn't entirely matter, though the prosecution believes that he actually didn't have another seizure because of how low his temperature actually was. He could have just been napping, and Joaquin used that as an opportunity to get him alone. Either way, while his son was busy on the game and he had a few moments alone with Prince, he used it as an opportunity to suffocate him. It could have even have gone that maybe Prince was making some noises while he was sleeping. Maybe he was snoring. Maybe he was dreaming. Who knows? But I think if Joaquin stirred up enough of a panic within that home saying, oh my God, something's happening with Prince, telling his son to go call 911, telling his roommates to go get the bath ready or whatever, clearing the room, the second he scoops up his son while all these people are running around trying to figure out what to do, that gave him the perfect opportunity to suffocate him without anyone seeing it. And even if they happened to see moments of him holding him, even if it was in a strange way, they might have just thought that he was trying to save his life. They detailed how just before Prince's death, Joaquin's financial stress was just getting worse and worse. He was living rent-free with his 2 roommates while the house he previously owned in Bristow, Virginia was in foreclosure. He had maxed out a $50,000 line of credit, and Shadow's school tuition bills were piling up. He didn't have a job and hadn't filed a tax return in years. So, as his bills started to pile up and he could no longer afford his life, instead of just getting a job and working, he decided to carry out yet another life insurance scheme. The prosecution argued that getting a policy like this in and of itself doesn't make Joaquin a murderer, but everything put together, his history of receiving benefits from other deaths, him refusing to work but having no problem spending, the suspicious circumstances under which Prince died, it all adds up to Joaquin being responsible for his son's murder. On the other hand, of course, the defense said that Prince's death was the tragic result of his illnesses. They said that after months of febrile seizures, him battling his illnesses for so long, his tiny body finally just gave up. They talked about how the initial autopsy report of drowning was biased and inaccurate. As I stated, when their expert went in and reviewed it, it was determined that it couldn't be stated as fact that he died from drowning. His cause of death was listed as undetermined, meaning that murder couldn't even be proven. They noted that every single thing found in that autopsy could be explained by Prince simply being sick. Joaquin's son, Shadow, plus his 2 roommates all testified at trial. None of them believed that Joaquin was responsible for Prince's murder, and they all testified to what I told you earlier. However, I do want to note that initial reportings in this case say that the reports between the roommates and Shadow were a bit inconsistent, but they didn't exactly say what made them inconsistent. Either way, the story they ended up going with was that Prince was asleep when he experienced another seizure. Joaquin then took him to the tub to splash water on him in hopes of lowering his temperature. They all said that the bathtub was never filled at any point because the stopper wasn't plugged in. The water was running, but the tub didn't fill. Therefore, he couldn't have been held underwater to drown him, which is just one of the many ways it could have been done, but that is what they argued. Joaquin's defense also claimed that the life insurance policy he took out on Prince was actually made as savings investments. During the custody process, his lawyers apparently advised him to take out these policies in order to show that he was getting his financial affairs in order, to show that he was able to take care of his children throughout their lives. However, the prosecution argued that these insurance policies were never brought up to the judge in the custody hearings. They never argued it as a point. It was never discussed. The judge did not know about these policies. So if these policies were purchased with the purpose of showing the judge that he was financially responsible, why didn't he show the judge these policies? Plus, how would a life insurance policy prove that he's setting up his kids for success? They literally only benefit from the policy if they die. It would have been much smarter to, set up an investment account or a savings account for college rather than a policy that is only paid out if they are dead. Taking out life insurance on a child to ensure they have enough money to be set up for their life literally does not make any sense when it's only paid when they're dead. Literally, this does not make any sense whatsoever. The trial lasted a total of 12 days with intense argument on both sides. This entire case, from the moment Hera found herself pregnant, all up until the final day of this trial, was a full-out war between Hera and Joaquin. So many questions, so much suspicion, yet so much doubt, so much that couldn't be proven. But in the end, the judge in this case was able to come to a final decision. Fairfax County Circuit Judge Randy Bellows found that Joaquin Rams is in fact guilty of capital murder. He read out a 62-page opinion which rejected the defense's argument that Prince died of a seizure. He decided that there was enough evidence to prove that he was either suffocated or drowned. He noted that Joaquin was under continued financial stress, which gave him a motive. After finding out about his son's condition, he used that as a convenient excuse to carry out his plan. The moments he had alone with Prince then gave him the opportunity. And what a smart plan to do it almost right in front of everyone so that no one could deny that this was an accident because they think they saw it happen. But when you consider everything, his past history of people dropping like flies around him only for him to benefit financially, he got away with it twice and probably figured if it happened in front of everyone, even if he did have a few moments alone, then no one could deny what Joaquin claimed. But you can only get away with the same thing so many times before those around you start to notice a pattern. He is very much willing and able to kill for financial gain, and he did it again to his own son, all to bank some money so that he didn't have to get a job. I do genuinely believe if this was the first time he had done this, he may have gotten away with it, but he was stupid enough to keep doing it, so thankfully he didn't. For his conviction, Joaquin Rams received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
There he is.
With a glowing smile and a big heart, little Prince was in so many ways his mother's pride and joy. So today, when a judge found Prince's father guilty of capital murder, Hera McLeod says she was only thinking of her son.
I'm just sad that he had to go through what he went through because he was only here for 15 months and he trusted Joaquin.
Family packed the courtroom more than 4 years after the toddler's death.
Emotional, too emotional. My heart is dancing because we finally got an answer. We got justice.
Convicted of capital murder, Joaquin Rams. The judge said that Rams calculated the murder for more than a year. Family described him in one way.
Bad seed. He's a bad seed. Bad seed. There's nothing else I could think of. He didn't do drugs. He was never mistreated. We loved him.
And he held him underwater until he died.
The motive for the killing? Collecting $500,000 in life insurance. Prince's mother says she has no words for the father of her first child. Instead, she has only gratitude for 15 months of joy.
In the past 4 years, I've thought a lot about what my life would have been like if Prince hadn't been in it. And
Say hi.
I'm just looking forward to not looking over my shoulder as much.
Hi, Prince.
Of course, this conviction and sentence gave Hera and everyone who loved Prince a bit of peace, knowing that the person responsible for so much violence, so much horror is behind bars, unable to hurt another woman or child. But Hera was left with the gut-wrenching feeling, knowing that she saw the signs. She warned the courts. She was terrified of this exact situation happening. So she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the psychologist who testified that Joaquin could be alone with Prince safely despite his concerning past. For a while, no one involved in the suit thought that there was any way she would have won. It was argued that even a psychologist couldn't predict what he would do. But in the end, Hera won her lawsuit and she was awarded $550,000. And it seemed that Hera put her money to good use. Since then, she has been outspoken about the consequences of domestic violence. She advocates for children involved in these types of families. She went on to write a book about the whole experience, from being a victim of domestic abuse to finally escaping the relationship, only for her child to continue to be forced to suffer. She wants to prevent this from happening to any other child out there and uses her voice to try and make that happen. To find out more, I will link her website down below. As I always say, it's so very impressive when families and victims of these horrific crimes use their trauma to try and help others. Hera went on to have more children of her own, and she stays a single mother, which is exactly how she wants it. All I can do is hope that she's been able to move on from this horrific tragedy and is living a happy, fulfilled life with her babies while always remembering the legacy her firstborn has left behind. But that is where this case ends. I know some of you may have differing opinions, and I'm so looking forward to hearing them. I honestly went back and forth all throughout researching this case, and even when it came time for trial, I wasn't sure if there would be enough to actually convict Joaquin of murder. But even though the evidence was relatively circumstantial and there was some questions around it and the medical evidence was a bit convoluted, I do think that Joaquin is guilty, and I do think that there was enough in totality to prove that. I think that he murdered his baby boy for financial gain. I do also think he killed his girlfriend for the money, and it's possible he killed his own mother, allegedly. Both of those situations are still alleged. So at worst, he killed 3 different people, all for financial gain. At best, he killed his own child after benefiting from his girlfriend and mother dying. Even if he wasn't responsible for their deaths, he certainly learned from those situations and not the right lessons. But that's what I think, and now I want to hear from you all. I have so many questions. Do you think he killed his girlfriend and or his mother? Do you think he killed Prince? Or is he literally the unluckiest yet luckiest dude out there to have all these people die around him but always get money from them? What do you think of Hera's lawsuit? Do you think it was justified? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn the notification bell to on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure you head to broom.com/RachelShannon and use code RachelShannon to get 65% off your order. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.